Well, we decided on the campaign because there's a belief that ordinary members of the public don't fully grasp the reality of lower paid public servants' lives and the way that they have to deal, just as private sector low paid workers have to deal with the cuts that have been imposed, €100 a week for the average member of my union. So this is about trying to explain the reality of low paid workers in the civil and public services and how they have nothing more to give. Well, the decision was to use real members of the union who work across the country to explain their circumstances. Too often, the feeling is that the media have a vision of a high, powerful, well-cosseted public servant on salaries above 55,000. That is not the reality. My members earn less than 45, the vast bulk of them less than 38,000, many of them on the average of 30,000, around €430 take home a week. Simply they can't make ends meet, and this latest draft is going to put further pressures on them. If you ask people to take on an agreement, and God knows trade unions are often lectured about their members adhering to agreements, both sides are meant to stick to the deal. This deal was meant to run to 2014, and there was meant to be a review after 12 months for people below 35,000. Neither happened. And the only way of the government doing that was to invoke Clause 128, which said they were broke. And they didn't do that either. Now, I suspect that's because they didn't want to worry the bond markets. But they didn't stick to the agreement. And the difficulty now is you're asking people to buy into an agreement on the basis that there'll be no further cuts. But they're going to ask themselves, can we trust the government? So it's about the way you do business. And there is a grave question mark in our head as to if you're not going to stick to the first agreement, can we believe you to stick to the second one? Would it have changed our position? Would it have changed our demands? No. We went into the talks quite sanguine, quite convinced that this would not be an easy process because they had already flagged extra hours, cuts in increments, freezes in increments, changes in flexi, changes in redeployment, all of which we said before we even started the process would be no-go areas for this union. So I don't believe, and I certainly didn't believe on Sunday evening at 8 o'clock when we saw the extent of the changes proposed, that there was anything really would have saved our participation. Now, a deal was struck. And you've got to accept that every union has its own reason and its own mandate to be in there. We got that deal last night. We've examined it. And despite very careful wording of certain clauses, particularly in relation to redeployment, outsourcing, and additional hours and attendance, we believe there are grave difficulties in there for people we represent because of the impact it will have on their working time and the consequent costs that will flow from that. So it's not just about increments. You could point to me and say, but sure, look, it's a small freeze for 3 months or 6 months if you're above 35,000. And yes, it's not the full freeze on increments that was expected. But it's the other material. That's why I said I used the phrase earlier on, too wide, too deep, and too unfair. It's the span of this agreement and the changes in this agreement, which when you drill it down into the local workplace, for instance, this agreement has given local managements the ability to tear up our flexi agreement where they have peak demand. Now, that's a very important element of the working life of my members. And for them to lose flexi in the high pressure areas will be a major disimprovement in terms and conditions. And on its own will cause a no vote for many of them.